welcome to Real Estate Development Land to Legacy. We've got Chris Robison with us today.
Real estate development. Legacy. Real estate development. Land to legacy.
Chris, welcome.
What a dance.
Right.
Go on.
First time I played it live, I used to be editing them after the fact, but figured I'd try to play it live and see how it plays out. Chris, this is a little bit different for me because obviously you and I know each other. We're collaborating on several projects. My past guests have been strangers to me, and I got to know them live on air. This conversation is going to be a little bit different, but I'm still going to start sort of cold. Let's talk about your background, what you do, how you came to be what you are. I've been kind of struggling with an introduction because you are a real estate professional, you're an investor, you're a fund manager, you're a lender, you're a developer, you're an operator. So I didn't know how to introduce you. How do you describe yourself?
Real estate investor. I've done a bunch of different aspects in the real estate world. I like to try and learn new things in that space. Always been pushing myself to try something new and continue growing and learning.
You've been at it for some time, right? About 20 years?
Yep. It's bought my first property about 20 years ago and then really got into it 16, 17 years ago. From that time, full career in the real estate space. Started out in lending, mortgage lending, and then hard money lending, and then buying some land properties, and then buying bigger properties and needing to raise money. And so some of those people that I had worked with in hard money lending invested with us in our other projects, and we have grown it since there. That's the 2-minute overview of it.
Right. So how does one become a hard money lender?
Hard money lender, aka private lender, they go synonymous with each other. You're just looking at a piece of real estate and deciding if you want to make a loan on it. So there's two sides to that. One, you've got your capital source, whether that's your own money or you're working with other investors' money or line of credit on your bank and a piece of property you own. Lots of different ways to come up with it. And then you're working with borrowers that want to usually fix and flip a house or develop land or build a new house. And they're looking for private money that's not bank financing. And so both of those lead sources, analyzing the deal and structuring it and putting it together.
Do you still do that, or is that kind of your past venture?
I like the idea of long-term hold projects and building generational wealth in my own family, and holding projects is how you're going to do that versus making a loan on something that's going to be there for 6 or 8 months and then pay off.
Right. Is it hard to evaluate a project from like a lender standpoint? I mean, I usually work with like banks, and they've got these systems in place and underwriters, and they've got this prescriptive process. When you're a private lender, not regulated, is your process different? Are you usually the reason I'm asking is usually when I think of a hard money lender is I'm thinking of like these loan sharks, that are beating the streets and, that are loaning money at these super hard rates. What does that look like?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely different than what a bank looks at. And one of the biggest differences is a bank is going to be, sitting in an office somewhere far away. And whereas when you're a private lender, I knew my borrowers, I knew who they were, I knew their projects, and I knew the neighborhoods they were investing in. And so I was really comfortable with the very hands-on, approach of who they were and where the property was at. Whereas a bank they're just looking at files all day long. And properties in all sorts of different locations and regions. So they rely on an appraisal report to give them enough data points on that. And then a bank will have a box, and they'll have all their yes and no's in this box of what they will and won't do. And an underwriter their job is not to make the box. It's just to see if the deal fits in the box. And so again, some differences between that versus private lending with people personally and work with that way.
Is it wrong though when they have a box, so to say, right, where they know what questions to ask and what parameters they need to care about versus somebody who does not follow those specific rules? Is it more risky for you as a lender to do these deals? Can you overlook some of the details that a bank would have to check a box, otherwise they wouldn't be able to pass their regulatory requirements?
Of how you can underwrite a loan for someone who's going to live in a house is our owner occupied residence. And so the houses that we were loaning on or properties, they're not someone's owner occupied residence. It's someone else's business. So they're buying a house that's in poor condition, fixing it up, and then selling it. So it's kind of the fix and flip model, or they bought some land and they're going to build a spec house on it. Or the other strategy is to buy a house that's needs some fixing, they'll fix it up and then refinance it and turn it into a rental house and build a rental portfolio. So those are the main strategies that we saw people do. Generally, we're looking at it's an asset-based loan is how we underwrite it from a private lending standpoint. What is the property worth in the back end? What are we loaning right now? Is there a big enough margin there? If we get take the property back because the borrower fails, are we going to be okay?
So you care less about the strength of the borrower?
Right. It's more the strength of the asset, but then also, does the borrower have the ability to perform? Is in their core competency to fix the house up and get that work done? You know, so some people that have no experience with that, they might fail. They might not be a good borrower.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. And then what would be more, um, I guess, more difficult being in this business? Is it to find new projects to finance, new clients, or securing investors to invest into the business?
Yeah, I think it depends on your network and who you already know in your circle of influence. You know, if you know a lot of people that are in the trades, the fields of construction, different types, a lot of those people like to flip a house on the side. Between them, if they're an electrician, they might know a buddy that's a plumber and a buddy that's a carpenter and a buddy that's a roofer. And so they'll just call their friends and they'll get it done. So it's pretty easy for them. Other people that have money, they have friends that have money and they're looking at how to invest in real estate. And so you go that way. So it just depends what circle you're in. One's harder than the other. Both needed to make money, right? You need the people that are flipping the houses and you need the people that have money to fund the projects.
Mhm. Right. And so from lending side, you started gravitating towards real estate investing and investing into various different properties parallel to running your lending business, right?
Yep.
How did that come about?
Uh, I mean, it's always been a study of finance and how do you build wealth. And that's was always the long-term goal and focus. And so knowing that if you're just making income, which making loans, you make fees, make interest, it's all just making income, but it doesn't give you any long-term assets to hold on to. And so knowing that so the long-term path to wealth is by holding properties and holding assets. And so how do you start acquiring those and what are the best strategies to do that? And then increase the value of those assets.
What was the first mention you bought your first property 20 years ago? What was that property and how did it perform for you?
Okay, so that property, I was 18. I bought it as owner contract. It was a completely gutted house. We started working on it. I didn't have good advisors. I was in over my head. I got my feet wet. I worked on it for about 6 months, and then I gave the property back to the seller. It was a $10,000 purchase price of the house and paid him $100 a month payments. I worked on the property, cleaned it up, but it was just too big of a project for me.
Interesting.
So that's my first fail. You got to start somewhere, right?
What did you learn from it?
I just learned the construction process was so much larger than what I was aware of on a big project like that. And then much easier to find a property that, you know, where the carpet is outdated and, you know, carpet and paint and something much simpler and smaller to start with. But I've done other larger projects than that one now and accomplished them. So I'm glad I got my feet wet and started with it. I didn't harm the seller at all. They had a ton of different properties for sale in Iowa where I was at. They were all derelict properties. So I didn't remove anyone's housing or hurt them. I paid a bunch of money in dump runs and worked many hours cleaning the property up and trying to make progress with it, but just realizing it was too big of a project for my skill set at the time.
For 18-year-old you.
Yeah, for 18-year-old me. Yep, it wasn't a good fit.
What was the next property that you bought?
The next property I bought was a fourplex. And that was a great property. Owned that for 5 years. Lived in one of the units and rented the other units out. And we fixed that property up over time. As people moved out, fixed up the units, and new people moved in, increased the rents by doing that. It was a good project and got my feet wet and got some success under my belt. I self-managed for a while, so I got experience working with tenants and learning that process by being in the thick of it.
Right. So that would have been when you were older than 18, probably closer to 20.
I was 22 when I bought that.
Yeah. So, okay. How does a 22-year-old buy a fourplex?
So on that one, I was at the real estate classes. I had my mortgage loan origination license. I was going to regular investor classes, and I met a couple of people. One was a guy my age. He had inheritance from his grandparents that he wanted to put into real estate. And then another guy that was retired military and wanted to get into real estate. So the three of us partnered up together on this property and did it. The one that had the military experience had good income. So we did the refinance in his name. And then other partner put money down. And then him and I did the work on the property and I managed it. It was my first property that way.
I was going to say that was your first indication working with investors.
Yep. So yeah, just,
Okay.
partner real estate is often a team sport. And so bringing on those people on the team that you can work with to help accomplish a bigger project than you can do on your own.
Got it. So the business kept growing since then. Now I have to ask, a lot of people in real estate, they would either buy and hold, a lot of real estate investors buy income producing properties for their obvious benefits. But then there's a different breed of real estate investors that invest in new construction. These are the developers that build something from ground up and have the vision and have much longer time horizons. And the people that I've met historically are split up into two groups. One that thinks that real estate development is easy, anybody can do it. You just get an architect, a contractor, get the building designed and get it built, and it's all going to be fine. And then there's another group of people that I met with that thinks that real estate development is related to a voodoo science, that only crazy people take these kinds of risks and it takes years to master, and there's only very few professionals that can do that. How do you how did you switch from buying and renovating income producing properties to doing ground up? And what did you think of that risk perception?
So going into it, I thought the risk perception was probably more simple on your first definition of it, but with my experience now, I'm going to say it's more the second level description of it. The complicated review. Holy cow, what's going on here to get all the pieces lined up and to make it happen. Yeah, there's having that experience behind me says it's many years on some of these projects, and it takes a lot of pieces, a lot of time. So I think it's much more difficult than what I ever initially would have guessed, especially the bigger projects. There's all so many factors to get aligned in the right timing, and timing is really important to get everything where you've got your equity partners, your lender, your permits all ready to go and say, okay, shoot the arrow now, let's and get that project off the ground and go vertical.
So what was the first property that you developed?
Ground up construction developed. We did a
Ground up, yep.
creating, in Tacoma. It's a 4-story building, 82 units, underground parking. It's amazing how many units you can put on such a small piece of land. I think our lot size in that was a half an acre, and we can get 82 residences on that in that space. Studios and 1 bedrooms, but still, pretty incredible.
What did you learn going through that process?
Oh, there's lots of things to learn from that. So yeah, we had a great contractor that built it. Really enjoyed working with them. They were fantastic. So that was nice to have that level of competence on our side. The amount of time they got from the moment we broke ground to the moment we had our certificate of occupancy finalized, signed off, it was 14 months. So that was pretty incredible to see that kind of construction done in that shorter period of time. We had a great team that we worked with on that. Understanding the budgets was one, building out our pro forma initially and having the right numbers in the right spot. We had a couple things off on there. And so there's some learning curves through that process. I wish we would have had somebody with a little more experience helping on that side, guide us through to make sure that everything was accounted for. And so our end result from a number standpoint was what we were going into it with. But yeah, overall, I think the project was a success. We were shopping for a construction loan in the summer of 2020. The world shut down from COVID. That was an interesting thing, but had a great broker that got me a construction loan, and numbers changed on us last minute. It wasn't the initial dollar amount we were thinking we were to get, but managed our way through it and got the project built.
Right. Do you remember some of the specific examples of things that you wish you knew before you started?
What did I wish I knew before I started? I think the budget would probably is the biggest one. I mean, understanding all the numbers and pieces. I was really surprised that uh, the city of Tacoma charged sales tax on the whole entire construction project. I was just like, that can't be. That that sales tax number is $1 million or something. Insane. It's a huge dollar amount. No, but those buildings are a big revenue generator for the city, so that's important for them. So I didn't understand that fact at all there. So it gotten some unclear information and was back and forth in our internal discussions there. I think the biggest thing, if I'm working with people that have more experience than me, would have been more helpful on that as well. Just so many details. I mean, when you're meeting with the city, there's so many details of questions that they're asking, and making sure that the project is in line with the fire department's requirements and the city's other energy efficiency stuff and the state requirements. And so there's all these layers of approvals and sign offs that have to be in a line to get your project design in a way that's there. Um, so again, a good architect helps guide you through there, but there's still plenty of decisions that you are making that the architect is trying to guide you wrong. But still, great to make the decision at the end of the day.
Right. Lots of coordination between different trades. It is very important for the architect to make sure that all the trades and consultants are coordinated: mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, interiors. Everything needs to be reviewed and considered. And of course, we always tell our partners it is super important to have a qualified contractor to be involved early on to estimate everything, because things are changing in this market. Things are changing so much. Unless you go through the process, it seems easy on paper, but unless you go through the process, you don't really realize how many different elements are involved in this process,
Yep, a lot of pieces for sure.
because your unknown unknowns is what is a definition of risk, right?
Right. Yep.
So that from that Tacoma project, and I know the answer, I'm just talking here for the audience, asking questions. But from that project, you and I got introduced. I was just remembering we met. I was trying to remember, was it 2 or 3 years ago? I do remember that it was my birthday. We were sitting at the sushi restaurant the first day we met, and in Tacoma, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
uh, ta- Talking about Mound Bay. So how did you transition from that 84 unit apartment building to having this huge vision of a 300 plus unit building?
So at the time that I was looking at that project, I had a couple of other partners and we had a large lending fund. One of our business goals was to have projects to be long-term hold inside of this fund. Mostly having the lending fund was our regular cash flow, and then building up something that we're holding for long-term was the goal. I saw this site and the opportunity with it, and somebody else had done a lot of the entitlement work on the property of what could be built there. We bought the land from him and that project from them, and then worked through it. Yeah, for many years. I mean, we're going through, is the project viable? I think that's probably the biggest thing that you spend the most time on. And is the design viable? And is it efficient? And then there's so much time with the planning that you ask that question like 10 different times through the process. And then you think of really fun dreams, like, can we do a rooftop restaurant? That would be so awesome to have this restaurant on top of the top floor that has the views over the city. And then you look at it, oh, the fire marshal says that's a disaster waiting to happen because XYZ, and you can't. And so many iterations that we went through on that project to get it to where we're like, all right, here's the most viable project. And we just simplified it. It's what the end result was with it. It's mostly housing units, then a little bit of retail space on the first floor to meet those requirements the city has. But yeah, so that's been a long project, and we're at permits now and ready to break ground. So getting all the financing lined up and in place for the vertical build would be really exciting to see that come to life.
Right. Yeah. Mountain Bay is an amazing project that I'm super proud to be involved with. The way it's positioned right next to the transit hub and overlooking all of downtown Tacoma, walking distance to everything. UW Tacoma is right there. The Brewery District, walking distance to downtown. The streetcar or light rail, whatever they call it there, the stop is right next to the building, where you can hop on the train and go around downtown and up to the hilltop. I love that neighborhood and I love that building, very cool design. I looked at that area and I'm like, this place is a little scary, is a little sketchy. But then you can kind of already see how it's being cleaned up. And over the next several months, we've observed homeless encampments being cleaned up and moved out of the area, and new projects spring up. I think that that area of Tacoma is going to transform in the next few years.
Yeah,
And
you look at it with its location of where it's at compared to, like you said, light rail, the train station, the entertainment district that's down there. Like there's so much going on. It makes sense to have housing down there. You know, some projects are like, why did somebody build that over there? But to me, it's a really sensible spot for development to happen there. And that's why we see multiple projects in that C block kind of radius that are happening. I think that'll be a major transition in the community in the next, 3 to 5 to 7 years.
absolutely, yeah. And we were just recently looking at the reports that Tacoma had the highest demand for housing, for apartments specifically, in the last 12 months. So that was exciting to see. We love working with the city of Tacoma too. Permits get approved relatively fast compared to other municipalities, and super easy to work with. So let's talk about something else. Switching gears, you bought another cool property, and I was telling my family and friends about it when I first learned about this project, and they were all laughing at me because must have been living under the rock and I didn't know what that property was. And now I talk to various people, and they're like, "What, you're involved with that,
Yeah.
Rosario?"
So Rosario Resort up on Orcas Island. So I'll make my connection to Orcas Island first, and then we'll talk more about Rosario. But my wife's parents have lived on Orcas for a few decades, and so we always went up there. And eventually we said, how do we live up here? And so in 2016 we moved up to Orcas and still operate a business down in Tacoma area. And so I commuted back and forth quite a bit. I got used to driving and the ferry rides. But yep, so loved Orcas Island for a long time. Have invested in other pieces of real estate on the island. And so once I saw Rosario was up for sale again, it just was like, let's see if we can make this thing happen here, and let's help redevelop that property, fix it up. There's some parts that are tired about it, and get it to where it's continuing on its legacy for generations to come. So it's a really cool historic mansion. It's right on the water. There's almost a mile of water frontage, 3/4 of a mile of water frontage with the property. The mansion was built in 1906 to 1909 by Robert Moran, who was a mayor of Seattle at one time before that. He was a shipbuilder and made a lot of money in his shipbuilding business, and was going up to Orcas Island to retire, and ended up living for many decades up there. He was told he had a short time to live once he was doing something he loved, which is building his fantastic grand estate and entertaining people as they came up in the city. His life just extended on a long time. It's a beautiful property. It's been a resort since 1960, and just gorgeous location. Robert Moran, at his time, he had 5,000 acres. He donated a bunch of it to the state park. And so there's a huge state park adjacent to the property. A lot of people go up there. There's lakes and waterfalls and hiking and biking. Just a beautiful place to reconnect with nature. So yeah, it's an incredible property and a fun project to be a part of.
Yeah, I visited the property a couple times recently, and it's absolutely gorgeous. So the mansion, I was amazed at the research that you've done about Robert Moran, about the mansion, and about all the things that are there. Chris gave me a private tour. I saw a lot of old things that are there. Tell the story about what's inside that mansion. How is it built? That organ room is huge, and what was happening there? What's happening there now?
Yeah, so it's a 30,000 square foot mansion. It was built with 12-inch concrete walls, and was built by a shipmaker, a shipbuilder, and so everything is overly engineered and is huge and, ship kind of themed. I think one of the things that makes it interesting compared to just another 100-year-old structure is it's always been sold furnished. It's a lot in there, original furnishings from Robert Moran's time, which is pretty incredible to still have. On the property, you go into, there's a 2-story music room on the second floor. So it goes from the second to third floor height wise. And it's got a balcony that overlooks down into it. And it's got this pipe organ that if you're an organ player and you like old historic organs, it's definitely going to be on your list to go and visit. So it's 1974 pipes that's in there. It still works. Robert Moran did not know how to play the organ, but he was quite a showman. And so he had a player organ up there. And so he would go upstairs on the balcony, was where the organ sits, and he would play the organ, but he would just be pushing a button and wow all of his guests with his fantastic skills, which is pretty funny.
Nice. I did play, I think, 3 chords that I knew on the piano. I played on that organ and it sounded cool.
Yeah.
So what is the plan with the mansion and the property? What's your vision for it?
Yeah. So the mansion's had a restaurant inside of it. It's been through different chefs over the years. It needs a restaurant operator who can provide fantastic service. And so that's what we're looking for right now is the restaurant operator that's got a lot of experience that can produce a really wonderful setting and experience for dining for people. It's a high-end luxury kind of dining experience up there. It's a beautiful location right there on the water. The dining room is beautiful. The kitchen has been redone and is beautiful. So ready for somebody to come in there and bring their vision and make the food. So that's one area that we're looking for right now. The second floor has a museum in it and in part of it there. So I'd love to expand that more. There's so much stuff that's in the different closets and cubbies of that property that would be really cool to show off history of both Orcas Island and history of Robert Moran and his business and history of this city of Seattle. He was the mayor of Seattle when it burned down and helped to rebuild it. So just a lot of fun, cool memorabilia that I think people in the Pacific Northwest would really appreciate and enjoy being able to see and read about and learn and be close to. And so putting a plan into place for that. The lower level is a spa. Its layout is really funky. So it really just needs to be gutted down there and the walls moved around and rethought to make that makes some sense there. There's so many really beautiful architectural details in the property. So again, on that lower level, it's got this amazing tile floors that are all these tiny little tiles that were artfully done that have been preserved over that time. Upstairs, the wood floors are parquet wood floors that are just beautiful and original. Just so many finishes that's original and gorgeous and architecturally important that people, you just walk in. You don't see construction like that nowadays. And so it's really a fun experience to be there walking around and see it.
I was amazed when I was looking at the master plan that was approved back in 2007 and largely not implemented, what the potential of that entire property is.
Yeah. So, I mean, there was a group that owned it from in 2007 and they had a hard sell at 10 years. And so their 10 years hit in 2008. So they were trying to get the entitlements done a lot quicker. It took them a long time. And so that's where they sold the property.
Right. Yeah, there's huge potential. The marina that's right there, that's adjacent to the property, which last time I traveled there, I took the seaplane that landed and docked right at that marina. So I walked on to the resort, boarded the little seaplane on Lake Union. It lands right in front of the marina. That was a very cool experience for anybody going out there on a vacation. That's probably the best way to travel.
Kimware is fantastic. Yeah.
So obviously, as a developer, I would like to see, maybe a couple hundred keys added to that resort. There's multiple buildings there already that are functioning. You keep operating them, right?
Yep.
There's demand. People love that area. How would you describe the demand for vacation destination?
I have a Rosario story. I love blah blah blah. I was married there, or my anniversary was up there, or we were up there for this special event. And so it's so many people have a memory of Rosario and have been there and they want to go back again. It's a place that you want to go back to again, over and over again. So it's got this following of people that just love it that's there. So that's really helpful from a business operational standpoint. We've not done much advertising yet. We really want to get some of our projects done, but we're full this summer. And then bringing back events to the property, weddings and other business and corporate events to the property. We have a lot of demand and interest for that. So people are really excited to be able to have a wedding up there again and make the memories that way.
So what is your vision for the next couple of years? The immediate vision and then the long term?
Yeah, so immediate vision, we're working on remodeling the event space. So there's a big, large event building that's right there by the water. That's about 8,000 square feet. It holds about 250 people. And the last several years, it's been a storage room. It's just been empty. I mean, full of stuff. But they haven't used it as an event space. And so getting that building up and going. There's a couple other buildings that I'd like to get remodeled up and going. And then working for our bigger picture plan for every development, adding, like you said, a bunch of keys on the property and getting more lodging there.
Amazing. Amazing. Let's see what else. So you are an investor and you work with retail investors who partner up with you to finance various different projects. Describe me what that looks like and what Empower Investing, which is your brand, what does it do?
Yeah. So we work with investors that want to put money to work. Most of our investors are people that are familiar with real estate or have invested in real estate in their careers, or the real estate agents. And so they like that asset class and they like to have their money in real estate. They trust it. They trust it more than the stock market. A lot of my investors still invest in the stock market as well. They're diversified out. But yeah, they like to invest in different projects along with us. Some of our projects are putting out cash flow, so someone can supplement their income or retirement income with cash flows from like a self-storage property, or maybe a private note that's making a monthly payment on it. There's avenues for both of those for cash flow. And then other development projects generally have more of a growth kind of model. You're putting your money in and it will grow over time. And you want the tax consequences throughout that process until there's a liquidity event and the project is either refinanced or sold. Providing different options for that average retail investor that says, hey, I want to put some money into real estate, but I don't want to go buy a $5 million project of my own. It's too much. I'd love to be invested in that kind of an asset. And so partnering up, as you say, working with people like that. And then the other options of partnerships are, people that have a lot of experience and will want to advise on different projects that we have, sit on a board and say, hey, I'll be invested in it, but also bring some expertise and advice to it. There's plenty of investors that we work with that have other businesses that are entrepreneurs. And so we reach out to them for assistance or advice on different parts of the project. For example, we had an HVAC bid come in on a project. And so sent it over to one of my investors who's invested in that project. And he has an HVAC company, but in a different region. And so he reviewed the bid and gave his points of advice on that. So it's always nice utilizing the collective knowledge of the circle of influence that we have with people. Some people, they've got properties and they want to do a 1031 exchange. And so they can defer their tax liability and put their property into another thing, but they want to be more passive instead of active. And so we've got options that we're done with people that way as well. I'm really just trying to see how we can be a service to people and help them meet their financial goals using a handful of different strategies through real estate. I wanted to try a bunch of different things on purpose so I understand how they work and then can use them as different tools to accomplish different goals. So part of also what we do is we partner with other operators on these projects that are really getting into the weeds on the pieces. And so it's not just me, myself, having to know every aspect of each of those businesses, but overseeing them at a high level and are we hitting our targets and goals with it.
And so for investors, I didn't know that you could transfer a 1031. So when you're selling the property, you can do a 1031 into a passive investment. Is that what you said?
So partnership, I'm going to say instead of the word passive, like some of these are going to talk to an attorney and they're going to say, you can't do that this way. And so if you do a 1031 into a partnership on a property, they're going to be a tenant in common along with us. And so there are some different rules there. So we'll set up a tenant in common agreement that outlines their duties versus our duties. Then eventually that 1031 partnership could be rolled into an LLC together and have some different preservations. Yeah, that's again, when we're getting to that level with Sephra and we're working with a 1031 attorney and getting advice on how to structure this and maneuver that in a way that's both compliant with all of those IRS guidelines, as well as operationally what makes sense.
Right. But the point being is that there are legal ways to optimize taxes and defer taxes.
Yes.
To benefit the group.
It's important to an investor that we're saying, how do we help them accomplish that goal? Working with the right professionals around us, CPAs and attorneys to get that accomplished in a good way.
Right. And I believe there's also ways to invest into real estate through like an IRA account.
It used to be when it first came out that people would set up they call it checkbook control. And so you'd set up an LLC your IRA would own the LLC, you would fund it, but then you have a lot more requirements of your own documentation and how you're doing that. So a newer way that have come out that is much more common now is a self-directed IRA custodian. You transfer your funds from whatever IRA you're in into the custodian, and then from that point you can make investments out of that. The custodian helps oversee paperwork, and all funds go through the custodian, and so they're not going to a separate checking account they have access to. And so then if you're getting money out of your IRA, they're going to send it out to you, just do a distribution and send the right paperwork to the IRS on that and keep you compliant. So that's really the preferred way, is just working with an IRA custodian.
Mhm. What are the typical returns that investors are seeing when they invest passively into a real estate project?
Yeah, so there's two parts to the return. One is cash flow and one is overall return. So a cash flow could be 6, 7, 8% kind of annualized return. And then sort of a mid-teens return is the overall, including the growth of the asset as well, that we've achieved for people.
What about the development property that's not cash
Yeah,
flowing
for
yet?
also mid-teens, and we've definitely had some projects that hit low 20s for people. So that's fantastic when we can hit that, and then market conditions are lining up for us. But yeah, we're targeting sort of that mid-teens kind of return.
Amazing. So the way you would finance a project is you work with the retail investors, you offer them participation in your projects, set it up that way, and that's how typically your projects are funded, right?
Yeah, that's the high level of it. There's
Yeah,
the debt piece, there's an equity piece, and so you're looking at both parts and what is the current market out there for debt financing and what's the optimal scenario between the two.
yeah.
I would say anytime before election year, there's always some uncertainty out there, so it's there. It seems like rates have come down a little bit since we've had last year. So that's nice to see. Loan to value is a little bit lower than they were in the past. So, sometimes you can get a 20, 25% down. Now it seems like it's more 30 or 35% of what banks are wanting to see. So, all of those little factors adjust the overall picture on it as you look at your numbers when you're putting the deal together. So,
Right. Yeah, we're recording this on September 17th. Tomorrow is supposed to be a big day when a lot of people are expecting Fed funds to come down. So we'll see what happens by the time this episode airs. We'll probably know the answer.
right, definitely the answer. Yeah. There's also the 10-year bond. I mean, that mortgage rates really go off of that a lot as well. And so that's moving independently of what the Federal Reserve rates move. So we'll see how all of it affects each other.
Yeah, this show was largely designed for younger beginner investors, real estate developers who are curious about development, who want to learn the process. And fundraising is one of the questions that I get asked a lot by the partners, by the property owners who we begin working with, is how do you finance projects? And so it's very helpful to describe the process. Typical equity and debt breakdown on a development project is these days probably about what, 65, 70% debt, and between 25 and 35%, I would say, equity. And so your model for equity raising is by working with retail investors and syndicating funds and financing the properties this way,
Yep.
which sounds like an amazing combination. It's a great opportunity for retail investors to invest in real estate and earn that the benefit of being in real estate without actually actively managing it, because it is, as we discussed, a lot of work. Whether you're managing an existing asset or going through a full blown development, it is truly a lot of work. And a lot of DIY property owners that I talk to who say, "Oh, I can do it myself," we usually say, "Well, yeah, you could do it yourself, but you're basically getting yourself another job." So if you're already
Over
full
career,
time,
it's a whole nother career. You got to learn it all. I mean, so many aspects of things to figure out. And you're gonna have some trial and errors and some,
exactly, you have to make mistakes to learn, and a lot of times those mistakes are costly. Which brings me to a question I ask all of my guests: tell me about a big mistake. Tell me a horror story, something that went horribly wrong in your past career as an investor or developer.
a horror story. I mean, there's always challenges, and I can tell you there's challenges with every single project. Um, the horror story was we had a 26 unit apartment building in Aberdeen, and we got it all fixed up. It was a derelict building. They had a bunch of basically homeless people in there at the time we took it over, and really had to just gut it and start over. So we got it all remodeled. It was looking good. And then the fire marshal and the building inspector pointed fingers back and forth at each other this way. He says this, he says it, and they wanted an interior stairwell to be installed for an additional fire escape. And I said, we already talked about this months ago, and you told me don't touch the exterior fire escape because it's grandfathered in. So leave it alone. So we did. We left it alone, as you said. So like you guys, so that was a disaster. So we had to, undo our finished product and install a fire escape stairwell through the middle of the building, redoing the electrical that we had just done, and got that in. And so that building was a big challenge. So finally we got the building complete as well. We got it leased up, started leasing it up. And then a few months later, we got a fire in it. And so it was start all over again on that project.
Oh,
Yeah. So that's probably my biggest disaster of a project, 5 years of working on it, of owning it. And I think we rented it out for like 8 or 9 months. It was such a short time. And most of that was under construction and dealing with fire and insurance and putting it back together again.
before you said that there was an actual fire in there, I was going to say, well, what was the lesson you learned from that experience? But now I'm wondering, were the inspectors right about it, about requiring that extra work to be done,
Um,
or it was useless anyway? It wouldn't have
the
helped.
fire wasn't that big of a fire, it was in the one corner. Yes, there was smoke, there was a stairwell literally across the hallway from it. So I don't know that it helped anybody actually get out of there quicker. So we'll see. I mean, my biggest lesson that I learned is get something in writing from like the fire marshal instead of a verbal conversation.
Get whatever information you get from building inspectors or plane reviewers or fire marshal in this case, make sure that it's in writing so that when the time comes to do your final inspection, they don't renege on their word or conveniently forget about what they said.
Yeah.
Of course, we've had plenty of experiences when, even when the decision was made in writing, an inspector could walk through the building and say, well, I don't care about what's been said in writing before. Code is code, and you have to follow the code. And they would be right.
No, it's just, you try to cover your bases as much as you can, but you always have the gotchas in the projects.
Makes sense. Yeah, there's definitely a lot to learn, and we're still, to this day, I've been doing this for 20 years, and every project there's a learning opportunity, is something that happens that teaches you another lesson.
Yep.
Chris, let's share your contact information. I'm sure there's going to be some listeners here who would like to learn more about Empower Investing, about what you do, and learn about your real estate projects and potentially invest. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So our website is empowerinvesting.net. So you can search for that. My phone number is 360-464-5411. So give me a call and we can talk real estate deals. That's always fun. Or shoot me an email, chris@empowerinvesting.net, and respond to that as well.
Excellent. Yeah. And of course, we would love to continue working with you. We're super excited about Mound Bay and hopefully closing in our investment deal on that project soon. And then Rosario is another huge opportunity for everybody, for investors to participate in and see the transformation of this historic place. And we have so much work that still needs to be done to re-envision, reimagine this place while maintaining the history and everything that this place stood for over the last however many years, well, over 100 years now.
Yep.
Chris, thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Real estate development. Real estate development. Land to legacy.